Hi, this is Dr. Rebecca Wood, and I would like to welcome you to the Week 2 lecture. This promises to be an exciting week in which we will discuss exploration, expansion, and faith. These are some suggestions for reading historic literature. Be on the lookout for non-standard grammar and spelling. You might discover that there are some words you really have to work at to figure out what they mean. And then search for the narrative or the story in the fragments. You may have to add information from what you know to make sense of the stories that we're reading this week. And then past language and customs may be surprising today. You might find that things happen that you did not know about or expect in the readings this week. And St. Louis can be a poetic place, which could be a positive thing or a negative thing, depending on your viewpoint. For instance, happy people are less likely to write poetry, or possibly people might be less likely to write poetry when they're happy. And what are the most likely subjects of poetry? Love, death, war. And try reading challenging works out loud. Hearing the reading assignment as you're reading it may help you understand it better than just trying to read it silently to yourself. And this week we will talk about a big real estate deal, St. Louis becoming the gateway to the West when the Louisiana Purchase occurred. And you can see from this map just what a tremendous amount of real estate that Louisiana Purchase involved. Also this week, it's very important, we're going to discuss the Lewis and Clark expedition. The trip took an entire 2-year period, so they didn't just go off and come back in a week. It was 2 entire years, and they explored the geography and getting to know the people. And this set the stage for expansion of the United States into what we know today. This week we'll also discuss the religious influences on St. Louis history, such as Father Jacques Marquette. He was a Jesuit priest who arrived in Canada in 1666, and the Jesuit influence throughout St. Louis, including St. Louis University, will be something we discuss and explore this week. Also, an even more local and more concrete influence here in St. Louis was St. Rose Philippine Duchesne, and she arrived in the United States in 1818, and she established schools, including one in St. Charles and one in Florissant. And she faced the challenges and struggles of life in a new land, and her letters go into great detail about some of the things that she faced when she lived here in the St. Louis area. And faith is the foundation of St. Louis, so we want to think about how important faith has been, especially the Catholic faith, in the formation and the development of St. Louis. And so this is the old cathedral, which is near downtown, and here is a picture of the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, which I took on a glorious day, and so it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. And if you have a chance to visit either of these cathedrals, I think you'll find them just amazing. And then there's a Jesuit tradition of St. Louis University. And some of you are taking the class from faraway places, and some of you are close enough that you can actually go and visit these beautiful buildings here on the St. Louis University campus. The Bishop Dubourg Hall, I just love that building, and it's got some glorious tall wooden staircases that you can just feel the history as you walk up and down those hallways and those staircases. And then there's the glorious St. Francis Xavier College Church, which they often use for graduation ceremonies and church services, and if you have never been there, I hope that you get to visit it sometime. And this week we're going to talk about the first published book of poetry west of the Mississippi River, and it was written by Angus Umfraville, and he was commissioned to write a poem about the siege of Baltimore, a battle that inspired Francis Scott Key to write the song that became the national anthem. And Angus was 23 years old when he came to St. Louis and published his book, Missourian Lays and Other Western Ditties. And here is a painting of the bombardment of the Battle of Baltimore. And as we are exploring poetry this week and other weeks and possibly in other literature classes, there's some suggestions I'd like to make about how to read poetry. The first thing you want to do is just quickly scan it for format and length. You can tell a lot just by looking at what type of poetry it is. Is it long? Is it short? Are the lines shorter or longer? Does it look like it's in more modern English or older English? And does it look like it's in a pattern like a sonnet where you've got 2 or 3 or 4 lines all chunked together in a stanza, and then you've got a space, and then you've got another stanza? Or is it in couplets, which would be 2 lines, and then you might have another space, and then there's 2 more lines? So scan it for format and length, and then read it once silently, and read it slowly out loud, maybe twice if necessary. If it's a really long poem, you may want to break it up and read only chunks of it at a time. Take notes as you read it one more time, because there could be a lot of meaning stuffed into an even a short poem. And look up words with which you are unfamiliar. Read it at least once more so you've read it 4, 5, 6 times, and then think about what the poem's theme or main idea is. Is it about love? Is it about war? Is it about life and death? Or is it just a fun poem? There are some poetry that's just written for fun. And a poem may have hidden meanings, or more than one meaning, or more than one hidden meaning. And then as we go on through this week, you want to be continuing to think about Paper 1, Exploring Early St. Louis. Please check your course calendar for the due date, and we want to keep on track with that. The length of Paper 1 is 4 to 5 full pages of text, and we're using MLA documentation this time, which is not that much different than APA documentation if you're more used to that. And you can always consult your handbook if you have one left from another class, or you can also go to the Purdue OWL website where they essentially have an entire documentation book online. And the file type should be attached as a Microsoft Word file so that I can read it easily, and so it can also have comments made on it. MLA, and if you click on these links you can get to the Purdue OWL to see the MLA formatting. At least 2 primary sources from our textbook. That means 2 stories from our textbook or poems. And you can do additional research if you want to, but it's not required. And if you do additional research, you must document that material in MLA style as well. And so for more details, please consult your assignment sheet. And so the description is that we've examined texts about the story of St. Louis before the start of the Civil War. What do those texts tell us about the city and the membership in the community? And then using the selection of primary texts, which we're reading and discussing in the first 3 weeks, including this week, you'll write your essay describing the history of pre-Civil War St. Louis. And in your historical reconstruction, you should consider economic conditions, social or cultural institutions such as the church or the government, and the physical space. What was St. Louis like to walk down the streets, or were there streets? And your narration should provide a debatable claim about the city that you strive to defend with concrete examples from your primary text. In other words, perhaps your paper is about how important Rose Philippine Duchesne was in the formation of the city as we know it. And so this is what you should think about as you're working on Paper 1, and I hope we all have a wonderful week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.